Welcome back to Third Eye Weekly. I'm your host, Zach.
I'm your host, Lisa.
And it's Parallel Week here on Breakthrough Radio. We're talking some very distinct parallels, notably in this week's show, the parallels between North Korea and America.
Yep, the parallels of democracy and fascism.
Yes, how nice.
How nice.
Well, we have an inside perspective into this really fascinating contrast provided by none other than the Swedish photographer Bjorn Bergman, who gave us a really nice and often frightening, enthralling, fascinating, and downright strange glimpse into this culture that normally we don't have any access to. And this was all courtesy of his photography. He was somehow let into the country after a very rigorous application process. They didn't want to let him in. But he went through these loopholes and finally found his way into the country. And he was only allowed to take certain kinds of pictures at first.
Yeah, he had strict protocols when he was in the country, was guided by officials the entire time. And during his tour, he was only allowed to take photos of happy North Koreans at parades, beautiful architecture in the capital, but never able to go to the villages where people are actually starving and digging in the grounds for any morsels of food. But Bergman actually defied all these rules, and he took photos of the people in the villages and actually published them with us, gave us the published photos, which are pretty remarkable.
They are pretty remarkable. And I mean, the government did catch him taking these photos. They apprehended him and they forced him to delete all of the photos, which was terrible for him because there were some great photos there. But due to a little trick, a little photographer's trick that we're not going to disclose here, for the sake of photographers who wish to continue retrieving deleted photos, he managed to restore all of them. And so we have some of them in the piece running by our staff writer, Rebecca Choderkoff. But this whole idea brings up some interesting questions about not only the ethics of this kind of investigative muckraking in journalism, but also the risks inherent in such a decision. Is it really worth it to risk your own safety, your own freedom, your own life, really, to come back with these kernels of truth?
Yeah, and the photographer right now, you know, he's okay. He's living a sound life. But what I worry about is the ramifications for what he has done. Sure, maybe his own life isn't at risk right now. It could be potentially. But what about the lives of the North Koreans that he captured? Having the North Korean government realize that these photos are out, is that really helping them in the long run? Are they being maybe now seeing a better way of life that's possible, or are they just going to be put and imposed with more harsher rules because of how people are, you know, just breaking the rules of their government?
It's a good question. I think it's so hard to really figure out what the implications of this kind of photography could be because we don't know how the Korean government's going to react.
Yeah.
All we know is that by doing so, Bergman and others like Bergman who have done this are helping to spread awareness about the terrible things that are going on in North Korea. Without these people, we wouldn't know, for instance, that back in 1995, hundreds of thousands of people literally starved to death as a result of not having enough food and the wealth not being distributed properly in the country. But we don't get these really real images to sink our teeth into. As the American public, we hear these numbers and figures like the one I just mentioned, and it kind of just rolls off. But when you see the pictures of what's happening here, I think it really penetrates your consciousness and it stirs a desire for change. How palpable that change will really be remains to be seen. But I think with whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, for instance, who risk life and limb to make these little pieces of truth surface to the public, it's now our responsibility to decide what to do with them. And I think that it's worth it. I mean, I don't think everyone would agree. I don't think most people would agree. I don't think people would want to go outside of their comfort zone to do something like this. But for those who are willing, I say, tip of the hat to you, sir or madam.
Yeah, it sure is a risk, and we'll start to see, I guess, the ramifications of that risk in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. One last note. I think that someone should just go in there with a camera and photograph Kim Jong-un.
Yes.
Kim Jong-un, we're on Un now, in his underwear.
and that would somehow dismantle his entire authority.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the authority is based on ego and this kind of prevailing notion that the ruler is almost like a god.
Yeah.
And gods don't wear underwear.
They don't wear underwear.
No,
yeah.
everyone knows that.
Of course.
Well,
It's the truth.
it is the truth. Check out the article by Rebecca Choderkoff up on the site and listen to the rest of our interview with Bjorn on this week's episode of Third Eye Weekly, brought to you by AT&T. I'm your host, Zach.
I'm your host, Lisa.